Hello, hopefully you guys can hear me. I am pretty bad at audio stuff. Adam will tell me if you can't in a second. I bet. I know it. Um, but I'm just gonna.
Everything's good.
Everything's good. Everybody. Oh my god, we nailed it the first time. Don't mind me as I pull up the list of things I'm supposed to say. Okay, well, we're here today to talk about the upcoming tournament this weekend, Silicon Dynasty. It is the first big cEDH tournament of the year, and it is ridiculous in terms of prize pool and people that are going and people that are hosting. It's going to be so much fun. I can't wait. Please, if you are not already playing and you're not already planning to go and you are relatively in the area, and that means within like a 6 hour drive, anything higher than 6 hours is, I understand if you're not going. Please think about coming to watch, visit, and just fraternize with all the people, because if you don't go and you just look at Twitter afterwards or whatever you use social media wise, you're gonna be like, why didn't I go? That looks so much fun. But anyway, um, it's this weekend, 13th through the 15th. It is a cEDH tournament where we are going to be, you know, casting some of the best and greatest decks in the world, and it's gonna be awesome. Today we're going to talk about kind of what we're expecting to see. We're going to ask our head judge Max here, kind of like some conduct questions, and then just go over some questions that the chat might have. But before we get into it, we have to thank our sponsors, Moxfield and the Epic Storm. Moxfield is the premier deck building website. It is the best in the world. It always will be, continuously improving all the time. The Epic Storm are they're the leaders in Magic content creation and product creation. They do everything. Definitely go check them out if you want to, just brush up on your 60 card and EDH knowledge. But if you can't make it out this weekend, we have 4 more big events coming up. Punt City in March, the Cookout in July, Windmill Slam in September. Chaos Proving Grounds is always happening online. Make sure to check those out. But if you can't make it out to any of those 4, there will be a big tournament at the end at a to be determined location somewhere on the West Coast. Kind of a finale thing. Um, yeah, that's pretty much everything. We're on Patreon if you want to support us there. We are a nonprofit organization that only makes sure that we get out to these events and make sure that we have stuff to put these events on. We're spending so much time and effort on making sure that we have a good stream set up and sound set up and everything set up for this weekend. And yeah, anything that you give us to kind of support our whole thing just goes towards that. No profit at all. But if you just want to follow us and continue to watch our content, we are here on Twitch, and you can follow either Adam or myself or Max on Twitter if you ever want to see what we're doing. But with that, I'm pretty sure that's everything that I need to say. Adam, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today we have with us a special guest. This is our head judge, Max, known online and in Discord as IBlameMax. They are an amazing judge in the judging space. They were the head judge at Punt City 2, as well as judging, various different events for Eminence and Magic events all over. I know you judged at like Magic 30, Magic Fest, all these other different things. So big judge in the judge space. It's our boy, Max. And we're gonna talk with Max about all things Silicon Dynasty, answer any questions that chat has, talk about things like player conduct, questions regarding the rules, just different things that you might have looking ahead into this weekend. This is your one chance to get these things answered live. Otherwise, you'll have to do it in judge chat, in our Eminence Discord or anywhere else that you can get in contact with us. So we'll kind of get right into that. So to start with, are we excited for Silicon Dynasty? This has been very long in the works, right? We've been working really hard for this, and you specifically have been putting a ton of work into this tournament on the judging side.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for this to actually happen. It's been way too long since Punt City. Definitely had a bunch of events in between, but cEDH is kind of like my wheelhouse at this point. I love judging cEDH, watching it, talking about it. So I'm definitely excited to get back to this and see what cEDH is like on the West Coast. Being East Coast, I know what it's like over here. I know what our meta is. I know how our players are. Really excited to see something completely on the other side of the way.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because this is one of the first major structured cEDH events. to be happening on the West Coast. The last West Coast event that happened, to my recollection, would be like the Cash Cards Unlimited tournament, which had some mixed reviews, and a lot of people, wouldn't have called it quite a cEDH tournament like the scale that this one's going to be at. The prize support for the event is absolutely amazing. It's $5K, thanks to our sponsors like Moxfield, who pumped us with some extra prize support last minute. So it's kind of a big deal. And when we talk about the amount of work that you put into it, I know that you've cultivated an amazing judge staff for this event specifically. We have some all-stars that are returning from Punt City, people like yourself and Seth, who will be our appeals judge. And then you've got, a whole slew of other staff that are going to be helping you judge this event. Do you want to talk about some of the people that you've brought on and like how they will contribute to this event?
Yeah, absolutely. So Seth is my appeals judge. He's basically my second in command. If you can't find me, you find him. On the floor, I have another 3 amazing people. I know a lot of people know who Charles is. He's known in the internet as C4, Mr. Bulbasaur. He's everything Bulbasaur about him. That's the only emote he ever replies with is a spinning Bulbasaur. I don't know, but he is a machine. He's been doing Mox Masters a lot. He's done, I think, 2 or 3 of them with me at this point. Fantastic. He has so much energy. He knows the rules so well. Super excited for him to be coming out. Excuse me. Also with us, we have Addie, who was also at Punt City. She's a newer L1 in terms of getting to events and whatnot, and I've been mentoring her along with Charles to watch her grow, and I'm really excited to see her on the floor again and see how much she's improved since the last time. She actually just got her own first head judging gig for quick shout out to Sword in the Stone in PA. If you're on the East Coast, they have a tournament in February that Addie will actually be the head judge for. So very excited for her to have that, and hopefully I'll be there for that to support her. The only judge that I'm not super familiar with who came on very high recommendation was Thomas Comney. He's joining our team for the first time. He hasn't really done many Mox Masters things, but I know his name from throughout the judging community, and he's definitely been a traveling judge. So I'm super confident he's going to be great with us too.
That's awesome. Yeah, if Punt City was any like inclination to how this event was going to go, it was one of the best staffed and judged events that I had been to in a while. Now, obviously, like any event, right, there's hiccups along the way, but everything seemed to have been handled like really, really well. The staff is very easy to get along with. They make you feel comfortable while you're playing, and it's an experience that most people are nervous to have. And you guys made it really, really smooth for all the players that were there. And at that time at Punt City, that's all I was a player. I wasn't a part of Eminence staff, and I remember how impressed I was being a part of that event and getting to see it. So now going into Silicon Dynasty, seeing the improvements, being through it one time, going through these online events, it really shows how much like the team has grown and where it's planning to go in the future with how these events keep going. And Eminence having 4 events slated for this year before nationals, it's only going to keep improving and keep getting better. So I'm really excited to see like how the judging staff evolves as we keep going through this year. I was going to say, eventually we're going to open up this chat to some questions for you and maybe some questions about how the tournament is going to go, some judge questions and things like that. If anybody has anything that they're not sure of or want to ask, they can throw that in the chat. We'll get to them as this stream continues. But yeah, the judging staff and the people that you've brought on for this event are going to be really cool. And I know that you've also put in a lot of work on the behind, like the back end side of things with like me and Shauna, for example, with casting and things like that. You're going to have, I heard, a judge that's going to be active giving rulings directly to us as the casters. So that way we have the best stream possible for the event, which is really exciting for all the people that don't get to make the event. Having a good stream. I'm just reading chat now. It's kind of
that really got me.
Yeah. Having a good stream that's really in tune with the game is very important because people can get really distracted from that if they're not aware of things. And when there's judge calls, things like pauses, time extensions, and all these things, it's really important to have that stuff available and at the ready, which is really cool. And I'm really excited to see that. And I kind of want to know how you guys have worked that out.
Yeah. So it's something that happens at all like major levels of competition. It's really good to have an official there who's overseeing the game so that one, the game that's on camera goes right and we don't have somebody calling us out for letting something slide for 10 turns that should have been caught. Um, and it's just really good for time on stream so that nobody has to wait for a judge to come over to answer the call. Basically, how that's going to work is we're going to have a laptop set up near the table with Discord open with a private link directly to your stream team. And you guys are going to get to ask any clarifying questions that you want. If you can't read a card or something out of frame, you'll be able to talk directly with us. And the same way, if we're giving a ruling, we can let you know what's happening and the fix or why we're doing what we're doing on stream.
Yeah, that's really cool because it gives me and Shauna the ability as casters to really let the listeners at home feel like they're right there at the table with all of us. Because I remember at Punt City, one of the best things about Punt City was when a game went late or when there was a feature match or something on display, the crowd would start to gather and it would feel like a such a unique experience that you don't really get with online events or even like things like SEG events or things like that. When there's a championship match and you have people standing, 15 feet back and watching, kind of examining everything and taking it in, and that experience of feeling like you're right there at the table is something that people want to get, especially when they're sitting at home. So to be able to get that experience through something like that and be able to know judge rulings and calls that they're happening as the game is going on is, I think, really important to the players.
Yeah, absolutely. It lets them better understand what's happening and how things actually work for people who haven't been to an event who are just watching EDH content.
And speaking of people that haven't been to an event before, I know that Silicon Dynasty is an event that we're having a lot of new players at, people that have never played in a cEDH tournament before, which is pretty cool to see, and is really important to us at Eminence because it helps grow that community and help make sure that events that we have in the future continue to grow and garnish more attention. Do you have any advice that you would give to players that this might be their first cEDH tournament and they're a little bit nervous going into it? Because I know that we've had a few people reach out to us in previous streams or even, privately online that like, hey, I'm nervous. This is my first event. I'm not sure what to expect.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the day, you really just want to remember that you're just playing Magic. It's for a prize, sure. It's against people you don't know, but just calm down, slow down for a second. You're just playing Magic, and the biggest thing is to not try and jump the gun. One of the biggest things I see at tournaments is people getting out of order with priority and people trying to figure out who has priority at any given time, whether it's an in-person event or an online event. The argument is always, well, did you pass priority? And it could get really weird when somebody doesn't respond and then decides they want to respond. So it's like taking your time to make sure that you're communicating with the other players at the table uh, as efficiently as possible is the biggest piece of advice. That, and I do recommend fresh sleeves usually.
Yeah, there's definitely some things that people don't always consider when they're competing at an event like this, specifically like rulings, things, and stuff like that. Something that like has really impressed me about you specifically as a judge is your ability to point out when a deck has inconsistencies. I've seen you look at a sitting deck at a table and be able to point out which cards have uh, different inner sleeves just by looking at the deck. And that's a big thing that people don't consider is like check your deck beforehand, get some fresh sleeves, and make sure all your inner sleeves match because they could be considered things like marked cards and stuff that you want to prevent being a problem in your games in the future, especially if you get deck checks, which most people aren't accustomed to because there are no deck checks at locals.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely like be ready for somebody to come to your table, a judge. Obviously, don't give it to a random person. For them to come ask for your deck and to put it in your deck box and to take it for to check and make sure that the list you registered is the list you're playing. This is the reason we collect lists is to make sure that people are playing the same 100 cards throughout the entire day. Which brings me to another point of in your deck box, please make sure that the only thing in your deck box is your deck and tokens. That's it. No other cards, no pet cards, nothing with a magic back, nothing that could be considered as part of your deck. Because if you hand it to us in the deck box, we're considering it as part of your submitted list. I've seen not even in EDH, but in just regular Magic, so many game losses and infractions from people just, hey, I got this pack of cards from the vendor. I'm going to put it in my deck box. Great. Now you've
Yeah.
added these cards to your deck and gotten a game loss for something that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, we have our first question here by Kobayashi. It says, I haven't registered my deck yet, and I'm trying to decide between two. Do I need to have my deck registered by Friday? Do you know the specific deck registration deadline?
I want to say it is Friday my midnight. I don't want to quote that.
Yeah, I
But
believe I believe you're correct. On at Punt City, it was the same thing. It's the night before the event at midnight is when the
yeah.
deck registration closes. So you have to get your deck submitted before that time on Friday. Otherwise, there's a penalty if you don't have your deck submitted the day of.
Now, to add to that, when you submit your Moxfield link, you are submitting a link to your deck list. If you know the commander that you're playing, you can modify that list up until midnight because it doesn't get scraped until midnight when everything closes. So Zane will go in and just copy everybody's current list at that time, and that'll be what you registered. So if you're still making card choices, but you know your commanders and you know what deck you're playing, I would caution you to submit your list now so you don't have to worry about it. And then as you're editing your deck, as long as you're using the same deck list, you're set. You're good to go.
Yeah, just be very careful and aware of that because any choices that you make or card choices that you change on your list will reflect as soon as that deadline is set. So if you switch a land or something like that and it doesn't reflect what you physically have in your deck, that will result in a penalty if you ever receive a deck check. Something even as simple as like having snow basics in your deck list and having regular basics in your deck. You know, shouts out to some of
That
our
did
fans.
happen. That
Yeah,
actually happened at Punt City. We had to give them an infraction. They didn't get a game loss, I don't believe, for that one, but they did. They did have the wrong basics, which does matter because it has implications in your deck as to whether you're playing like things like extraplanar lens or not
Taming
things that are
Max or
typically
things.
seen. Yeah,
Yeah. No, and that's very important. So it's these little subtleties that might affect players that haven't played in an event like this before. So things like making sure your deck is 1-to-1 to your deck list is very, very important. And just something to, keep it gives you peace of mind if you know that going into the event, right? If you sit down at a table and you know my deck 100% matches my list, you're going to be a lot more relaxed when judges are going around giving deck checks than the person who didn't check. And then the day of, you're like, oh shit, did I, forget something? Did I remember to do that correctly? And I've had that feeling before, even at
yeah.
Oktoberfest, the last event I competed in, I forgot to double check. And the day of, I'm like, oh man, I don't remember if I submitted the right list or not. And if it's, if this was the list I was modifying that has 3 cards different or what it is. And, you just want to prevent that stuff from happening in the future. So, like, just to reiterate some of the stuff we went over in your deck box, only have your deck, your dice, and your tokens. Don't have any extra cards. Don't have anything that could be considered a magic card. Don't use other magic cards for tokens in your deck because, that can be represented miscorrectly as well. And make sure that your deck is registered correctly and matches your physical 100 card deck. Shauna, you have been like relatively new to the tournament scene, right? Do you remember any of the questions or concerns that you had when you first started playing and first started competing in these events?
Yeah, so my biggest concern is always it seems to differ slightly between tournaments. It's always how long are the rounds, so I know exactly how long I have to win or draw, and what are the point percentages between wins versus draws, and how many rounds are there. Sorry.
Okay. So as far as points and percentages, that's not necessarily something that we as judges usually handle. We don't comment on standings or anything to that effect. I believe we're still using the 301, the win-loss draw, which is like the standard as far as Magic tournaments are concerned. It is 75-minute rounds, and day 1 is 5 rounds, with the 6th round on day 2, if that's still correct. I'm actually just trying to pull it up to make sure I'm saying that correctly.
That sounds pretty accurate.
Yeah, Zentek, just to clarify here in chat, Eminence uses the 0-1-3 policy. They don't use 5 points for a win, right, Max?
As far as I'm aware, that might have changed with the most recent Mox Masters. I just want to confirm. Uh,
But yeah, we have a lot of questions rolling in now, so this is really cool because we'll be able to get to all these. While you're looking this up, Max, if you have the ability to, Ken Bauman asks, if I have a deck box with 2 separate compartments, one for 2 separate decks, am I okay to have 2 decks in that deck box?
no, the deck box you're handing me is considered to have everything that you're intending to play. Ideally, if you bring a deck box with 2 decks in it, how am I supposed to know which one you're supposed to be taking out? And then when you take that out, you could be taking out either of those 2 decks. You shouldn't, obviously, but that's why you can only have a single deck box for this one.
Mhm. Yeah, so if you are bringing a deck box that has 2 compartments, you should only have in that deck box the deck that you're competing with. That way, it simplifies everything for the judges, doesn't lead to any miscommunication, and you won't receive a rules infraction for simply just utilizing the box that you normally do. Also, we have Lancer Pants in the chat, and they said, "What are the requirements for an allowed proxy?" So, I believe for our in-person events. And Max, you can correct me if I get any of this wrong, but we prefer all proxies to be of original Magic art. So whether that be Magic the Gathering online art, any art that's been printed by Wizards of the Coast to represent a card, that is allowed art for a card. And then we also, for Silicon Dynasty, are allowing playtest cards as well, correct?
Yeah, playtest cards or the modal double-faced filler cards. Those we're allowing as long as they are handwritten, clear, and present all of the relevant information. Not saying it has to be verbatim, but it has to be clear and legible to the standard Magic player as to what it would be. As far as the proxies, yeah, as long as it's Magic art. Again, no slips of paper in front of other cards. It has to be like a proxy that you would get from Etsy or NPC Fill or Mythic Black Core or any of these services that provide playtesting cards. Um, Not just something that you printed on your printer and put in front of a basic land, because that changes the consistency and the thickness of the deck considerably. So if not your entire deck is not that way, it's gonna mess a lot of things up, and you be able to feel out where those cards are. Unfortunately.
Yeah, and to clarify for people that don't know what we are calling these playtest cards, we're talking about the Moto double face cards. So if you remember the cards that were used for flip cards in like Shadows over Innistrad, any of those old werewolf cards for when you're doing draft, it's a card with a magic back, and then the flip side of the card is blank with 2 lines for the name of the card, and then it's just blank white filler space, right? And so what they require you to do is they require you to put the name of the card, the CMC of the card that it is, and then the exact text for, yep, there you can see Max is holding one up, and the exact rules text on the card verbatim. So that way, when you're presenting this card, anybody can pick it up and read it and know what it is based on the name and the rules text on the card. They can know exactly what it does. This doesn't always look great on stream, but it helps everybody understand what the card is and allows people to play the deck that they want to play without necessarily having the cards. This is not like a Monarch event. We do not provide you with playtest cards, but we will have some modal double face cards on site for you to use if you forget a proxy at home. But we will not personally be providing you with any proxies on site, and you don't have to register for any proxies that you would like to bring to the event. If you have any alters or things like that, you can always request those in our Eminence chat. There's a chat in there to request alter approvals to make sure that your cards are allowed to be played, because at any competitive event that you play at, a judge has to approve an alter that you have to make sure that it is playable. Isn't that correct, Max?
Yeah, and it's not just a judge. It specifically would have to be either myself or Seth who would be approving them, because it's a head judge or an appeals judge would be the only ones to say that this is what we're accepting for the event. I am very lenient. I love alters. I have a ton of them in my deck. So for the most part, alters specifically, not proxies. Proxies I'm more strict on. For alters, as long as the art is not obscene, not safe for work, derogatory in any way, and you can reasonably tell what the card should be from like a relative distance. I don't have to like read the card 15 times to remember what it is. I'm probably okay with it.
Awesome. Let's see if there's some more questions. It looks like, Ken, you got your other response answered too, but yeah, you won't get penalized for having a deck box that can hold 2 decks, only having one in it, right? If
Yeah.
there's a full slot and an empty slot, that's fine. You just have to present your deck box with 1 deck in it.
Correct.
Yeah. I can see that Old Dirty
Um,
Socks is asking about our COVID policy. Our specific COVID policy, you can contact our TOs about that, and they will send you a message regarding the COVID policy. Let's see
I
here.
did get clarification on the point system.
Mhm.
So we're actually using the 501 points model.
I
Oh,
love
okay.
to hear that. I
So,
love that.
yes, if Zentek is still in the chat, that clarifies things. So that means it's 0 points for a loss, 1 point for a draw, and then 5 points awarded for a win.
Right.
Some things that we can mention too, like while we're going throughout this stream, something that's really cool to bring up now is that Silicon Dynasty is going to be a part of the Eminence profile system. So what that means is that as soon as the tournament is finished, your record will be visible on your Eminence profile. So that means however you place in Silicon Dynasty will now affect your win percentage on your Eminence profile. So if you go to Eminence's website, eminence.events, and you log into your account, you can hit the little hamburger icon in the top left corner and go to your profile, and it'll show you all of your Eminence tournament history, your win percentage, your wins and your losses, your opponent win percentage throughout all your events, which is really insane and really cool to see. And, for future events and things like that, or when you're messing around with your friends, you get to say, hey, your opinion doesn't matter because my Eminence profile is better than yours.
Yeah, that's something I was pushing for a while. Like we have this software now that does amazing things because Zane's a wizard and can do whatever he wants to whenever he wants. But Magic players love numbers and then they love hard facts and ways to gloat. So now we've given them that. You can see your history and track your progress and track what decks you did well with. Kind of gives you some self evaluation too because you can see where you did well and what you need to work on or what you need to stay away from just as a player.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really cool feature that we're like really excited to see and be a part of Eminence. Something else that's new to Eminence is if you go to eminence.events, we now have an event hub. There's even a website for it. It's called EDH.events. If you go to that event hub, you get to see all of the cEDH events that register through the event hub in your local area. So right now it has like Mox Championship, events in like Shelbyville, Tennessee, Silicon Dynasty, Winnaboxes at local LGSs, PDX cEDH leagues. Punt City 2 is on the event hub. So any local LGS that wants to be an affiliate store to Eminence is allowed to make an account and post on the event hub. And these are visible for everybody to see. And it shows you the nearest event to your exact location, which is really cool and a super easy way to organize where you can go and play cEDH in the community and some of the larger tournaments, including some small ones all the way down to locals. So the event hub is another amazing addition to the site and helps you keep up to date with the different tournaments that are going on throughout the year. So as we keep going, like I said earlier, if you have any questions about Silicon Dynasty, any judge questions you've ever wanted to ask, we got Max here, our head judge, and he'll be willing to answer any of these questions for you. And if we don't have the answer, we'll get them to you as fast as possible. Because luckily, we have an amazing team that we can hit up instantly and ask anything that we ever wanted.
Yeah.
And before we move on, I do want to make a quick point about the 501 system. There has been a couple events in the past that have, I think when cEDH tournaments were first starting out, 301 was pretty common, meaning you get 3 points for a win and 1 point for a draw. And the difference between that system and the one that Silicon Dynasty is currently using, the 501 system, while 2 points may seem small between a win with 3 points or a win with 5 points, it is significant. I cannot stress that enough to new players and returning players. I have heard so many times that we're just going to play for a draw or attempt to get a draw or always play for the draw or we can still get a draw. Never settle for a draw. the fact that there is a 4-point difference between winning and drawing, it is immense. And in order to get that top 40, it is a top 40 cut, right? I'm not just speaking out of my ass.
No, this is top 16.
Top 16. So there's only a top 16 cut. That's it.
Yeah, so the amount of rounds, Max, correct me if I'm wrong, is this a 6-round event?
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be it's a 6-round event with a cut to top 16.
So
Yeah.
5 Swiss, and then the 6th round is top 16?
No,
6 Swiss.
6 Swiss.
6 Swiss, and then 16. Okay, got it. So there's 5 rounds on the first day, 1 round on the last day. At the end of that first day, at the end of those 5 rounds, you want to be looking at 3 wins, ideally. Because the average to get into top 16 is usually around 16, 17 points to feel comfortable. So going for all of your draws and trying to go for the draws is not a winning strategy. I can guarantee you that, because I had that mentality for a long time and it was horrible. Always look at every game as a win, as a possibility that you can win. Always go for the win, never settle for the draw. The top players that consistently top these tournaments are always going into every game looking to win, because you can draw all the games you want and you can go 1-0-4 throughout this tournament, but you're not going to walk away with anything. You're not going to get anywhere close to the top 4. So that is my biggest advice to everybody. Just like Mace is saying in the chat, 1 game at a time, always go for the win. Never settle for a draw.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So I've been doing cEDH since before Eminence, with my local store, and we've tried a number of different systems, from like order of players dying with variable points to the 301 to just 1-0, no points for a draw. It's hard to figure it out, but I think 501 is the right way, because you want to disincentivize draws, because it forces a lot, like draws being viable forces a lot of weird politic talk that at the end of the day just makes all of the events go longer. And that's something I want to mention too. Go back to that though. So with the 501 point system, your wins mean more, and your losses also mean more, and your draws are essentially close to not so bad losses. So it really makes you want to just play better and play more consistently, rather than playing for second best.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the topic of draws too, because I know that this is something that kind of came up with you today, Max, because there was a concern about this. What is the policy for conceding during a game that Eminence holds for their events?
Sure. So for the most part, for all of our policy documentation, we actually follow the Monarch documentation. The only place where we differ is that Monarch used to do this, but we still consider that concessions are sorcery speed. They have to happen on your turn with an empty stack, because otherwise it can be considered detrimental to the game, because our decks are tuned to being for 4 players, and removing a player when somebody's going for a win basically could make that player lose. Like conceding in response to somebody's first Nagila attack basically makes them a duck in water. Like they got
Or
nothing.
like conceding with a dockside ETB on the stack, right? When you have
Right.
all your artifacts in play, when someone's attempting to do an infinite mana loop. These can all be things that could in theory be considered a spike concession, right? Or someone could be conceding for the idea of like trying to get the draw, right? Like, oh, if I concede here, they don't win, and maybe I'm more likely to get the draw. Those are things that we don't really want to encourage, that type of play. We want someone that's attempting their win not to be thwarted by something that's outside of the game, right? And a concession could be considered outside of the game. So you have to concede at sorcery speed on your turn when there is nothing on the stack, correct?
Right. And that's different from 60 card, where you can concede at any time, and like that rule makes sense there, because you concede and the game is over. But in multiplayer now, you concede and you've got 3 other players who kind of look at each other and like, now what? Because how am I supposed to do this thing that my deck is supposed to do with a perfect number of players? Like, it just makes so many decks just not able to function.
Yeah, and it leads to a lot of feels bads as well, right? If you're about to win with your Malcolm Glenhorn combo and a player concedes the game so that you don't have the correct player count to do the loop, it's like it definitely doesn't feel fair. And so we just want to prevent that entirely, and so we force concessions to be at sorcery speed, which does not mean that if you feel uncomfortable or unsafe in your game, that you cannot seek help.
Yeah.
That's the main reason why, like, the Wizards rule is that concessions are instant speed.
Mhm.
So if at this tournament at any point you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, call a judge,
Yeah.
because they are there to assist with that and they're there to help with that. Max, maybe you can touch on that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there shouldn't be any conflict resolution between players during games, essentially. That should be like the best thing to do is to remove yourself from it and call a judge to handle it. We're never not going to be able to come and assist you. Um, we are tournament officials to make the game run properly, but we're also there to make sure that everybody's having fun. And if you're not comfortable, you're not having fun. Um, the end of the day, the most rewarding thing for me is talking to players about how much they enjoyed the event and how well it was run, and that's not going to happen if people aren't like comfortable with who they're playing against or feel welcome in the environment itself.
Yeah, that was something that was really important that we talked about on our last stream, Shauna, where we did our in Magic stream. Was that feeling comfortable in the game is something that's more important to people than not, right? And if they feel unsafe or don't feel comfortable, where can they go if they're seeking that help? And the answer is always, call your judge. C4 put it best in chat. Judges are community members first. They're not there because giving penalties are fun. Nobody thinks giving penalties are fun, and if they
Right.
do, they probably shouldn't be a judge.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of judges who go through that phase of now I have the power, let me use it to give penalties. I see it in a lot of new L1s, and some of them grow out of it, and some of them don't. And thankfully, most of the ones that don't, we see it in them, and we just don't bring them on for events. So they still have that judge title because we can't say no to who's like becoming a judge because it's an open program. But at the same time, they just don't get to work events because their talent speaks for themselves.
Yeah, very, very telling. Um, so on this topic of Silicon Dynasty and judging and things that are going on moving forward, are there any things that you want to express to players, Max, that just like maybe for player conduct, talking about how to behave at a table, how to respect your opponents, things like that, that just like are always good to reiterate? Maybe thinking of like when you do a player meeting, what are some things that you talk about that are important for all players to just consistently hear and consistently know going into an event like this of this size?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm actually stricter on, or attempt to be as strict as possible on, is slow play, which is like the killer of our format. It's the death of stacks decks, because stacks decks are never the ones playing slowly. That like people need to keep playing. Some of the things that attribute to this are people spend way too much time in the politicking phase and trying to convince other players to do things. Like that's not what this game is. Players are making choices. You have a right to talk to them and ask them to make different choices and influence them however you can, but spending more than 30 seconds on a play talking about it, the player's probably not changing their mind, and you should probably just let them do what they're going to do, because otherwise you're going to wind up in a worse situation in time and with a draw. I think that's one of the biggest reasons that stacks players go to time, and a good stacks player shouldn't go to time because they know what they're doing with their deck. Their turns take 3 seconds and then they pass it on. It's everybody else trying to figure out, debating what stacks piece to get rid of, or trying to move through their turn under those stacks pieces, looking at which card they're going to play for a little too long. Um, that's really like, if you're gonna talk about it, if you're talking about it for more than 30 seconds, it's probably too much. Um, all of my staff also, to my knowledge, hate slow play. So I'm sure we'll be poking people and asking you, giving out cautions, which is something that like doesn't happen anymore. It was removed, but we still give gentle nudges of you should probably play faster. Like you might want to make a decision.
Yeah, and the onus isn't just on you as judges. The onus also falls on the players as well. If if you see someone at your table that seems to be struggling with lines of play, or not moving through their turns fast enough, don't be afraid to call a judge over. And you don't have to do it in front of everybody. You don't have to say like, "Hey, this guy's playing slow" or whatever. You can ask to be removed from the table. You could just say like, "Hey, this guy's taking really long turns, eating up time, couple of minutes at a time. Can you please watch them and enforce some slow play?" And that's something that a judge can do, where they can sit and monitor the table for a little bit and make sure that this player is taking their turns quickly. Now, obviously, you're not going to have a judge babysitting every single table, but there is some responsibility on the player's end to try to enforce slow play if you see it there. Otherwise, if no one is calling it out when they see it, it'll never get fixed, and it's a problem that'll consistently keep plaguing the format.
Yeah, so I'll actually say this for more than just slow play. For any issue that winds up coming up at a table, you should call a judge. The worst thing you can do is try and fix it yourself. We have the knowledge and the experience of what should happen and how to fix it in, excuse me, a very quick and efficient manner so that we can get you back to playing. If you guys start, or you players look at something and try and fix it yourself, you're going to spend more time on it than raising your hand and waiting for a judge. And you shouldn't have any fear of infractions, even if you were the person to make a mistake, because we use infractions as a teaching opportunity. It's not really supposed to be a penalty. They carry a penalty to show the severity of the mistake and how it disrupts the game. But really, we want to use them to teach players what they shouldn't be doing, and we want to hope that that mistake isn't happening over and over again. And the penalty kind of just tracks that to see if maybe the same player is making those mistakes. Um, Sometimes those mistakes are intentional, and that's an entirely different conversation that we don't want to have happen at any event.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's really cool to touch on, is that like an infraction is not the end of the world. Like you didn't like a game loss obviously is huge, right? In any tournament, but a GRV or an infraction or a warning honestly doesn't mean that much unless it's
it doesn't.
unless it's consistently happening. So if you receive a GRV in a game, don't overstress, don't have a panic attack, don't think that the world is over, because I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you need multiples of the same GRVs either in the same game or across the entire tournament for something to come about of it. And
Right.
then that's when serious penalties start to come into play. But just because you got a GRV because something wasn't correct, or because maybe you had an outburst that wasn't like if a judge is talking and you talk over the judge, right? Like you're not going to lose your entire tournament status because of that, and you'll get a warning, and just now don't do it again, right? And you'll be fine for the rest of the event. I see a lot of people that get really worked up and really panicked when they receive like a games rule violation. It's like, hey man, don't worry, just don't do it again, and you'll be okay, right? Like brush it off. That's a learning experience, and let's keep playing and have some fun.
Yeah, absolutely. To touch on the example that you used, though, outbursts and things of that nature, if I'm giving something for unsportsmanlike, that's usually more close to like a game loss, and like unsportsmanlike majors, and another issue that like unsportsmanlike conduct is taken a little more seriously because outbursts like that make people uncomfortable and don't create a safe environment. So we have to take those more seriously than like drawing an extra card. But like drawing extra cards by accident is an easier example. It's like I drew 2 cards for turn. A hidden card error is not the end of the world. We have a fix for it now. I used to be a game loss, but that was way too severe for like 2 cards sticking together when you put them in your hand. Um, so I think, yeah, it is important to keep in mind that everything that we do is a teaching opportunity, and the penalties that we impose are there just to say don't do it again. Like, unless we're removing you from the venue, it probably wasn't that severe of a thing.
Yeah. Old Dirty Socks asked, and this is a topic that you can answer if you'd like to. I know it gets really kind of in the weeds for judge staff a lot, but it says, are there any specific policies for spite play or king making? Not that I expect to see very much of it.
Okay, so I have an opinion on spite plays and king making. I don't think it exists realistically. Spite concessions, sure. That's one thing that's very blatant and obvious, that you're preventing somebody from winning and you are not able to win. We play a format where the entire idea is to make the plays that give you the opportunity best to win. You don't know what's in that player's hand unless they're telling you. Unless they tell you, if they're telling you that they could stop the world and they're just going to let it through because they don't feel like it and they don't have the win on their own turn, okay, that's a little suspect, but that's like beyond just like a spite play as people know it. saying a spite play a lot of the time, I'm gonna get something for this, but a lot of the time it's players just being salty that they got stopped. Like, you're going for the win or you're presenting a major threat. This person's evaluating the board this way to say that you have made a threat and I need to deal with it for whatever reason you don't know. Because you don't know what's in their hand, you don't know their line of play, you don't know what they value as far as pieces on the board that they need to interact with. So, for the most part, spite plays are blatant if they happen, but for the most part, what people call spite plays are really just people playing the game to try and win.
Yeah. I think that that was pretty well defined by you there. Normally, in a tournament setting, you would never even see what we would classify as a spite play, because everyone's goal is to try and win. Now, obviously, there might be outliers and there might be situations that are unique, and I'm not trying to discredit how anybody views those situations. But for the most part, in tournament play, you're not going to sit down and counter somebody's spell and they're going to blow up 3 of your permanents because you did that. That's just
Right.
not that's just not how the game works, because that doesn't boost their win percentage in any way. They're just like, what are they getting? Some, temporary satisfaction or something. It doesn't
Yeah.
really equate to game wins, especially in a tournament setting. So we rarely experience that, and luckily there isn't a requirement for any enforcement because of that. And it's not really something you can enforce. Like, what are you going to do? Give a guy a slap on the wrist and be like, "Hey, why'd you do that?" There's no really way to prevent that type of play or those type of play patterns, and so there's not a ton of enforcement that goes into it because you just don't really see it that often.
Yeah, I
um
can't punish a player for their choices that are like legal game actions. Like regardless of whether they're good at Magic, they could just be a newer player who's not as strong strategically and just wants to learn their way. Like, is it frustrating for you? Absolutely. Did it
um
cost you the game? Maybe, but it's stuff you
yeah.
have to deal with.
Yeah, Mormonator asking, isn't spy play going to be something at some point? Like, eventually, certain players could end up being targeted based on reputation. To be honest, that does not sound like spy play. It sounds like a player evaluating a table
Threat
situation.
evaluation.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
they think that you are the better player at the table, and they're targeting you because they think that you're going to be able to present a win better than the rest of the table, I wouldn't call that or classify that as spy play. And there's no way to enforce that. Just
Yeah.
like, that player's good. Like, sorry, man, you have a reputation.
As somebody who before judging was victim to get rid of him, he's going to kill us all on a regular basis. Yeah, that's really you've proven that you're a good player. Your name says it for you. Like you've just established that you are a threat to be dealt with and left alone. You have a better command of the game rather than some no-name new players. Like if I'm in against like Mikey, for instance, playing Grixis, I know that I have to kill him before he goes off. Like most of my resources are going to stopping the turbo player before he can speed his way into some Grixis bullshit. Excuse my language. Before like he takes the game away. So it's just like your name is essentially a curse in that respect because people know you, so they know you're a strong player and they know they have to be wary of you. Whereas like no names coming in get away with a lot more stuff.
Here's a question that I think actually is important, especially for people that have never played in tournament CDH before. Sharky M02 asks, "What's the policy for takebacks in a CDH tournament?"
So immediate decisions can be reversed. That's actually part of the Magic Comprehensive rules. Like you're not locked into a decision before you move on from it. Um, so obviously you have to call a judge. You can't just do this on your own, and you have to like essentially plead your case to either myself or Seth because it would be a rewind. But there are cases where players are allowed to change their decision, especially in the immediate moment. You like all the times we're looking at the board, and if we have a removal spell, we're thinking about 10 different possibilities. There's nothing that says I can't like point to this basic land and say something completely different. And now it's like, which one did you mean?
Yeah. And if you're ever confused about when you're, allowed to take something back, guess what? You can always call a judge
Yeah,
and figure it out. Like, I mean, I see it all the time where, I might tap a land, go to put a spell on the stack, and be like, no, I won't. You know what I mean? And there's certain things where if priority hasn't gone, there's like it's a big into the weeds kind of topic. So if you're confused or you're not sure, call a judge and it'll get cleared up immediately. That's usually the best recommendation you can give to anybody when it comes to a tournament or an event like that. Just call a judge. Recently, I remember there was a situation at like Oktoberfest where my podcast mate Kian drew a card on a Mystical Marrow trigger before priority had passed on the trigger, and the players initially were going to try to solve the problem themselves, and then decided, you know what? How about instead we just call a judge? And luckily, Seth was there and was able to solve that entire situation. Granted, it was a 30-minute judge call, but that was because a lot of things had to be taken into account when it comes to mistriggers and things like that. But I'll tell you what, that 30-minute judge call was still probably faster than the table arguing about that trigger. Because when you have things like win percentage, prizes on the line, and things like that, problems will never get solved by the people that are competing. It's always better to have an outside force like a judge, or it should be always a judge, come and fix that situation.
Yeah, we cannot stress that enough. There's going to be a moment in your very first game, most likely within your first two games, where a little thought is going to run through your head that says, should I call a judge? As soon as you have that thought, call a judge. Like, stick your fucking hand in the air and call a judge. Because not only, like, time is a resource. Even if you are an Allah and you are trying to win on turn 2, you need time to win. And any time that is wasted by you guys trying to figure it out yourselves or think about calling a judge but not actually calling a judge it's gone. It's in the air, and you're never getting it back. And if you are a turn or two away from winning because you didn't call a judge, you're going to be so pissed at yourself. So I promise, as soon as you think of calling a judge, just do it. You're not going to get targeted by the table, or maybe you will, but it doesn't matter, because as soon as that judge comes over, your time is protected, and they will add on any additional time that you need for that game, and then rounds will go along. But that's just how the game works. That's how cEDH goes at this point. And even if you have made a stupid mistake, like, I'm going to give you two very specific examples that will hopefully help you realize that judges are on your side. I have literally moved to combat and said, I have gone to combat, had the win in combat, and said, main phase 2. And I said main phase 2 because I was moving to main phase 2. And then I said, oh shit, I meant to go to combat because I forgot that my creature had summoning sickness or whatever. Can I move back to combat? My entire table said no. And then my judge said no. But I was allowed to take that back. Because even if your initial judge gives you a ruling, you can appeal that ruling, and you can ask for a different opinion, and you can ask to find max. Even if you think you are being ridiculous and are wasting everybody's time, please pursue your judge call as far as you need to, as far as you think you will. I one time swung my Ragavan into an elk that I didn't know existed because the token wasn't on the table yet. And I asked Libby at an Oktoberfest if I could take back my attack on my Ragavan because the player had not put the token into play yet. And I thought I was fucked. I thought my Ragavan was super dead because obviously the rapid hybridization had resolved, and everybody knew it resolved, and I knew it resolved, and I just didn't see the token on the table yet because it wasn't. And after one appeals judge and then Libby, the head judge, he ended up letting me take it back. And I'm not saying that, I'm not saying to abuse judges to fix your mistakes like I did, but just give it a try, because the last thing we want you to do is leave a game or have lost a game because of something you should have done, because you should have called the judge. I don't want you ever leaving a game being like, I should have called the judge because I might have won. And saying to your friends, I would have won that game if I had called the judge. Just let your losses be because of your own misplays or because of how good your opponents are, and not because you didn't call a judge. Don't doubt it. As soon as you think about doing it, just do it.
Max, are you able to explain to people who don't know the appeals process? Because, if people have never gone through the appeals process before, there's some like unknown things that can lead to problems if you don't always know what you're doing. Like, you can appeal a floor judge, do not appeal the appeals judge, like things like that, because it can lead to things down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. So we as judges, surprisingly enough, are human. We don't know everything. We get things wrong. It happens. We have an appeal system, so if you get a floor judge and you ask for a ruling and you're not comfortable or satisfied with that ruling, or for whatever reason just don't agree, you can ask for an appeal. Those appeals will come from either myself or from Seth. Um, if you can find Seth, he likes to disappear. Uh, that's a completely a joke. He's always on the floor and doing stuff. Um, you can appeal floor judges. When it comes to head judges and appeals judges, essentially what they say is final. We try to take a number less calls than regular judges, just um, to make sure that players have the option to have that elevation, to have that appeal, rather than just giving like a final word. But for the most part, like floor judges appeal, head judges don't appeal, but that doesn't mean that you can't talk to us. Like if we deliver a ruling and you have a reason to think that it's completely different, don't be afraid to like respectfully talk to us and communicate what you think should have happened or why. Um, like as I said, we can be wrong. It happens. Um, like anything else. So when you call a judge, if you're not happy, just tell them that you're not satisfied or you'd like something additional. Don't be rude to them, because that's another problem within itself. Like I wouldn't get nasty with the judge who's taking your call. Um, but otherwise, then they'll get me or Seth, and then we'll handle it from there.
Yeah, and something to be like very upfront about when you say like don't be rude to your judges. For one, if you think that a judge got a call wrong, do not, you know, act like you know more than this judge, right? You can politely pull them aside or say, "Hey, I would like to request an appeal," and they should have no problem with that. You know, they're judges; they understand how this process works, and they will gladly go and fetch either the head judge Max or the appeals judge Seth. Don't be like, "I think you got that wrong," blah 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 blah. Get all snarky with them and be rude, because for one, you can, you know, get a penalty for that, and then two, it's not, it doesn't look good for you as a player, and you should be treating everyone at the event with respect. Also, I've personally seen Max and Seth admit to getting calls wrong. I've seen it where after a game or after a match, they sit and they talk with these players, and they go through this line, and someone might bring up the MSPG, right? The Monarch documents, and say, "This is what I thought was supposed to happen. Can you answer this question for me?" And I've seen it before. I have a personal experience where a table that I was at with Seth, there was an appeal. The appeal ended up being wrong, and after some further deliberation and after the game, Seth said to the player, "You know what? That's on me. That's my bad. And I apologize. I know for next time how to get this right. And I'm sorry that I can't change this ruling now, but I can assure you that I will get it correct the next time it comes up." And there's no fault in that. And there's a lot of respect there to admitting when you get something wrong. And that's another thing that I really admire about our judge staff is they're not afraid to be upfront and honest, especially when mistakes were made. Because like you said, Max, everybody makes mistakes, and that's just a part of life, and it's a part of getting better and how we improve as a community and how we improve as a TO, you know, being Eminence.
Yeah, with that, I think it's a big statement of character as far as judges are concerned when they can admit that they're wrong. I know a lot of people from competitive aspects who hate judges. A lot of the time, we have a very bad reputation as like these demonized people who just want to sit there and make you lose games. When that's really just not the case. There are bad judges. I won't deny that. I don't know any of them personally because, as I said, they don't get rehired. They come on for an event or two, do their thing, and then you don't see them again. Um, but it's those judges, and it's because they're floor judges, people interact with them the most. So that's where you get a lot of these poor interactions where people come away with these horror stories of like, wow, judges are terrible people, and then don't trust them. And I really work to change and like look the other way for that. Is if I get something wrong, I'm gonna apologize. I'm gonna like come to you and talk to you about it and tell you I messed up. I'm sorry this happened, and if we can apply any type of fix, we do. But for the most part, it's usually after the game.
Yeah. No, it is a huge, you know, reflection of character to see that. And it helps with, you know, what I stated earlier in the stream about making the players feel comfortable, right? Knowing that you have a judge staff that's open, that's honest, and willing to have these discussions really helps people feel more comfortable in their games. And so, you know, shouts out to you guys for keeping that up. We're at like the 1 hour 10 mark. So I will say, if anybody has any last minute questions, anything that they want to have answered, now's your time to do it. Otherwise, we'll be, you know, hitting the end of the stream very soon here. But Shauna, is there any things else that you know you can think of that you would want to ask Max before we move on?
Uh, kind of my always biggest fear going to a tournament is players who get salty. And just to make a note, 5K as a prize pool is the second biggest prize pool I have ever seen in my cEDH career. Second only to a literal cash cards tournament, and that guy is a professional football player, so of course he has the biggest prize support. But 5K is a lot, and having that on the line brings the best out of people, and that is both good and bad. Obviously, to be in an environment where everybody is trying their absolute best to win and putting their best foot and deck forward, it's a wonderful experience to be around. You learn a shit ton, and the atmosphere and the energy is just so great. When everybody is trying their best to win, it's awesome. But unfortunately, when these spite plays happen and when these, you know, heated calls happen, people get pissed. So if I'm at a table where somebody is either spite playing me or is clearly upset, and I don't know whether they're targeting me or not, I just know that they're getting like snarky, basically. You know, every comment is obviously passive aggressive. Everything is happening badly. It's nothing is necessarily like, he's not yelling and exploding everywhere, but you can tell his energy is negative and he is making negative impacts on the game. If I were to call you over and I said, "Hey, would you please watch this person's behavior?" What kind of experience do you have with that, and how do you usually handle it?
So I've actually experienced this a few times, specifically, not to point it out, but with women in Magic. When I was doing a lot of 60 card things, this happens. This happened years ago, like probably close to a decade ago, back when like PPTQs were still a thing. Which for anyone who's played only EDH wouldn't know. A PPTQ is like a preliminary Pro Tour qualifier, so you had to get through the PPTQ to get to the PTQ to get to the Pro Tour. It was a long situation. But so I've definitely seen it where players start to get salty and people start to feel really uncomfortable. And absolutely, if you call a judge over, the same way that we're going to watch a game for slow play, we'll absolutely watch a game for people getting aggressive, or because we don't want that to happen. We want to be able to stop that. And like, I guarantee people's demeanor will change if there's a judge on the table for 1 to 3 minutes and then they just walk on by. If it comes back and persists after that, like depending on what type of behaviors they have, we'll have to look into it further. But usually that's enough where people like reset and be like, "Oh, I'm in a public setting. Maybe I shouldn't act like a dick."
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds wonderful. Yeah. And the idea of this tournament is that we want you all to walk away and say, "You know what? That was a great fucking tournament. I lost some games and I lost them honorably. I don't want you to walk away thinking it was because of this player." And I want you to, you all know that feeling when you walk away and you had a great time with three of the players or two of the players, but one or two of them was just not having it. If you were ever getting that situation, please approach a judge. Please approach Adam or I. You will be able to see us very clearly. We will be casting all the games. Like, if you have any issues, any trouble whatsoever, please come up to us. I am very good, because I've been forced to because of my job. I am very good at receiving very negative comments. If there is
Yep.
something wrong with our tournament and you want us to know, and even if you don't want us to know, please offend me. Like, do your best. I promise. Like, after the first round, please tell us as soon as possible, so your next 5 rounds are amazing. Don't let it sit in your head. As soon as you have something that you can fix, something that we think that we should know about, please tell us immediately. If you even think about maybe you should tell us this, please tell us immediately. The worst thing you can do is take it home and have it affect your next games. Just get it off your back. Let us carry that for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like the questions have kind of slowed down in the chat. So we're probably going to end up wrapping it up here. But before I let you go, Max, thank you for coming on. Obviously, we appreciate that. Thank you for helping the players out, giving out some advice, answering some questions, and putting everybody's minds at ease going into this weekend. It's going to be a big weekend. It's going to be a fun weekend. We're going to have an amazing time. It's going to be great to see everybody out there playing, everybody out there competing, putting their best decks on the table and their best skills as pilots on the table as well. So thank you for coming on and answering all this. Why don't you let the people know where they can find you, where they can contact you, and ways to get in touch in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So mostly I'm on Facebook, which is just facebook.com/IBlameMax, I believe is my link. Everything for me is IBlameMax. You can find me through all of social media that way. I'm on the Eminence Discord server on the Moxfield, the cEDHU. You can always at me there. If you could find me, you're welcome to DM me. I'm a little slow sometimes with Discord, so a DM is best if you can find my handle. But I usually respond to them like within the day.
Awesome. And then Shauna, let the people know where they can find you.
I am very good at Twitter. I'm extremely talented. I know the best tweets. Adam can attest to this. I make great tweets. You can find me underscore Shauna Gillis underscore. I'm very funny. Please, at any time during this tournament, I have my phone on me constantly. I read a lot of books and watch a lot of anime on my phones, and I will be doing that between rounds. Especially if I get into a round where like the seventh blue player, the seventh blue farm player of the table is playing, and I get kind of bored, and they're like going through a very slow breach line. I might pull out my phone. So, like, my point is, at any time, if you are uncomfortable, if you are curious, if you have anything to say whatsoever, you just want to share something about the tournament, please message me on Twitter. Like, DM me. I will see your DM and I will respond to it. I'll find you in the tournament, and then we can talk. I'm very lonely and I want to talk to you, so please DM me. Adam, where
And
can they
then
find you?
Yeah, you can find me at anywhere on social media under the tag Poppyphobia. Obviously, I have my podcast. Anywhere that you find Eminence, you'll be able to find me. I'm at every in-person event. I'm at all the online ones, whether I'm casting or competing. You'll be able to find me there. And before we sign off tonight, remember to check out all the new things that Eminence has going on. We have a tournament circuit coming for the year 2023, starting with Silicon Dynasty this weekend. There's 4 events on the circuit total, with a nationals tournament at the end of the year, with our biggest prize support out of any tournament ever. So if you want to be able to qualify for that event, play in some of these, tournaments throughout the year, and that news regarding when nationals will be coming out very soon. Also, make sure you check out EDH.events to find out all tournament news, all tournaments going on throughout the United States. Anybody with a profile is able to post on the event hub, local stores and affiliate stores, as well as different tournament organizers. So that's edh.events. Eminence has Eminence profiles that are now available. So if you've ever competed in an Eminence event before, that means Mox Masters, Silicon Dynasty, any of the events for 2023. Soon will be Punt City. You can go to eminence.events, log into your profile, and you can view your tournament record, opponent win percentage, the decks that you've played, the events that you played in, and all of that is public information with a shareable link that you can share with people, so you can make your opinions worth more because you have a good win record. And other than that, thank you to our sponsors, Moxfield and the Epic Storm. Special shout out to Moxfield for helping make this tournament a 5K. Special shout out to the Epic Storm for providing things like tokens to our players for all of our events. We have great vendors coming to Silicon Dynasty. We even have some cool artists that are going to be there. Also, what was I going to say? We have cool artists that are going to be there. And then if you aren't able to make it this weekend to Silicon Dynasty, please, I ask that you come and watch the stream. Me and my partner here, Shauna, will be casting the entire event live for all of you to see. It will be an amazing time. All of our all the money that we get from Twitch donations are going to be donated to Extra Life. So that's going to be something that's really important. It's going to be like basically a charity stream within a tournament. So make sure that you tune in for that. And it's going to be a great time. So come and watch some cEDH with us. Come and watch the best of the best while they're there. And it'll be a great time. Other than that, thank you so much for watching this stream, and thank you, Max, for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Bye. Have a good night.